let's talk a little bit about some of the scenarios that can create our neuromuscular misalignments leading us to joint pain. One of the biggest problems is sitting. So people sit all day long and they never move, and they sit in terrible positions. When you chronically sit in a terrible position, you very frequently are overstretching the ligaments of your sacroiliac joint and your back, and you're going to end up with back pain. 80% of Americans have lower back pain, and I would say 50% of those get that back pain just from sitting improperly. So how do we sit? We want to sit in neutral spine. We want our knees a little bit lower than our hips, and we want to make sure that our legs are lined up properly. So you want to be up on your sits bones. These are our sits bones. We want our feet about hips distance apart, and you want to make sure that when you're sitting, your knees aren't all jammed up and you're not rounding back. Having your knees up and rounding back like this is going to overstretch all of the ligaments in our lower back area, and that's going to destabilize the sacroiliac joint. It will also put pressure on your discs, and repetitive trauma in that situation over time can lead to herniated discs, and that's another way that you can get some back pain coming straight in through your spinal cord or out through the nerve roots here. Another way is walking inefficiently. So people start to develop different ways of walking because of muscle imbalances, because of muscle weaknesses, because of overstretching particular areas. And as we have an improper, it's called gait pattern, we start to put strains and pressures in different parts of our body. And again, this is one way which we get a significant amount of lower back pain. So it's important when you're trying to recover from these issues that you look at how you sit and you have someone analyze how you're sitting to make sure that during your work situation you're sitting properly, as well as to look at your gait pattern and make sure that you're standing and walking properly. Other things that start to happen that create chronic joint pain due to neuromuscular misuses, shall we call them, we have the weekend warrior syndrome, we have the sedentary lifestyle syndrome, and we have the asking our body to do too much from what it's been trained with, which often comes from a combination of those two things. So when we don't use our muscles very often, the outside shell, or the inside stabilizing muscles begin to atrophy. And then when we go to move, we start using our outside, bigger shell muscles. So we have posture muscles in our spine. They're called multifidi. They're supposed to work to help keep our spine in place. Over time, they will start to atrophy. And then when we go to move, we won't have those muscles to stabilize our spine. And we'll go and pick something up and blow our back out simply because we can't brace ourselves with our multifidi and other muscles like our transversus abdominis. The other thing that will happen is those deep shell or stabilizing muscles will be so weak that they just can't turn on, and we will use other muscles to do the job. So in our shoulder joint, we have rotator cuff muscles, and oftentimes those begin to atrophy, and they will displace the movement, the roll and slide that happens in the shoulder joint because they're atrophying, and then other muscles will have to take over, like our upper trapezius and our deltoids, and they won't have that support of the deeper stabilizing muscles and the rotator cuff muscles. That can lead to all sorts of things. That can lead to rotator cuff impingement, that can lead to neck issues because of overuse of the upper trapezius. There's all sorts of things that start to happen with these chronic movement problems simply because we're just not moving enough, and our deep stabilizing muscles just atrophy. And so then we have the wrong muscles doing the wrong jobs. Then there's the weekend warrior. So this is the person who sits all day at work, doesn't do anything, and then goes out on the weekend and gets into sports, is out in the water, is doing all sorts of lifting and moving things around, and their body's just not prepared to do it. Their ligaments are not strong enough to hold them together, the tendons aren't strong enough, and the muscles aren't strong enough to hold them together to do what they want to do, and they end up injuring themselves simply because they haven't trained themselves properly. And then when we ask our body to do things that they're not trained to do on a regular basis, we're setting ourselves up for injury. So the number of people I know that have injured their back doing things like moving their office or cleaning out their kitchen is kind of off the charts, simply because they, again, spend their days sitting and working at a computer, but they don't do any exercise or any activities along with that, and then they go to do a little bit harder work and they end up injuring themselves. So this is one of the ways that you can end up with an injury, but then also that can turn into chronic joint pain that you have to deal with and get that inflammation out of there, and that inflammation is coming from the trauma that you've put upon the joint by not staying strong and keeping fit. Now let's talk about the autoimmune issues that create chronic inflammation in the body. And we're talking specifically about joints. So these are going to be diagnoses like rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, gout, any sort of itis that is going to apply to the joints specifically with the symptoms. One of the first ways that we start to bring our body into a state of inflammation is through chronic stress. So that can be stress from outside of our body, but that it can also be coming from inside of our body with an imbalance in our microbiome or other toxicities that we have going on, maybe from amalgam fillings or things like that. Our body elevates cortisol levels in response to these deeper hidden things going on to try and combat them and deal with them. And it puts our body in a state of a stress response with cortisol levels elevated. And that is one of the ways that we start to bring inflammation into our body. Another way is liver congestion. So over time, when you have all of these toxicities in your body, your liver can become clogged or congested, and then it starts to disrupt your ability to detoxify yourself, and then all these toxins start to build up in your body, and that can be one of the ways that we can start to bring inflammation into our joints. Another thing that will happen is we will have an imbalance in our gut microbiome, or in our microbiome basically anywhere in our body. So we are a home for parasites, bacteria, fungus, and yeast, and if that balance becomes off and we're taken over by bad bugs rather than being supported with good bugs, those bad bugs create a great deal of toxicity in our body, and that toxicity, like I said before, lipopolysaccharides, will go into our joints, and then we start attacking our joints because that's where the bugs are. So that's another way we can do that, is with a disrupted microbiome or gut dysbiosis. Blood sugar dysregulation is another huge contributor to our internal stressors that we have going on in our body. Chronically eating processed carbohydrates and sugar just throw our blood sugar out of whack, and that elevates our cortisol levels, and we have to respond to that as a stress response, and that throws everything else off in our body. So chronic elevated blood sugar is another way that we can contribute to autoimmunity and inflammation in our body. Another trigger for autoimmunity and joint pain is gluten. So gluten is part of the protein in wheat, but it's also in barley and rye and a bunch of other things as well. The human body cannot digest gluten, so every time we eat it, we start to create a little bit of a dysbiosis in our gut lining, and then everything in our gut lining can get into our body, as well as gluten itself. Those gluten proteins can be confused with our joint tissues, just like the tomatoes and the potatoes and the other nightshade plants, and then it creates the molecular mimicry, which causes our body to have inflammation. Nutrition deficiencies or nutrient deficiencies, not having the proper nutrients in your diet, affects the way that your body can calm inflammation and just overall function. So that also contributes to joint inflammation. And then medical and dental injuries. So things like antibiotics that disrupt our gut microbiome, or amalgam fillings that put heavy metals into our system that our body has to deal with. Those are all types of things that will contribute to autoimmunity and inflammation in our joints. And overall, any sort of toxin that overpowers our body that we can't handle. So this can include mold toxicity, other heavy metal toxicities, fluoride in the water, any of these toxic elements that get into our body at a rate faster than we can get them out through our liver, just creates a big toxic mess that we have to deal with. And one of the results of that big toxic mess is chronic joint pain. And then we end up with these diagnoses of autoimmune joint issues going on. So we're going to keep working on and talking about these things as we move forward in our discussion of joints and inflammation. Now, with this, most people that I work with that do have joint pain, they end up having a little bit of both. So they end up having some sort of misalignment or faulty movement pattern in the joint, but at the same time, they have some chronic inflammation going on from their diet and lifestyle. And when I'm working with people, we work together on both of these things to help eliminate the joint pain. And I've created an entire program called the Joint Pain Eliminator Program that I'm very excited to share with all of you. And in the upcoming episodes, we're going to start going joint by joint and looking at the neuromuscular imbalances that may cause joint pain in each area. So thank you so much, and I am so excited to get started with this with you. And if you have any questions, if you're on social media, you can put them in the comments below, or you can email us. And you can check us out at www.upsidedownpilates.com, and that will be for the neuromuscular issues, or www.upsidedownnourishment.com, and that is where we focus more on the diet and lifestyle and autoimmune joint condition issues. Have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you next time, where we start digging in joint by joint.
Upside Down Pilates Unlimited. Get Upside Down Pilates uninterrupted with no commercials or ads. For a limited time, we are offering a special early bird discount at less than 17 cents a day. And you can lock in your rate forever. We'll keep adding new lessons. At Upside Down Pilates Unlimited, you can watch all the full 1-hour episodes of Upside Down Pilates on all your devices. Roku, Apple TV, Android, select smart TVs, iOS, Amazon Fire Stick, the web, and more. Anywhere the Vimeo app is supported. The next best thing to taking lessons with me. Plus, this is a great way to help support the channel and help keep us making great content. Upside Down Pilates Unlimited, everywhere, anytime, commercial-free, affordable. Visit www.upsidedownpilates.com to sign up now.